ग्लोबल स्किल डेवलपमेंट मिशन में आपका स्वागत है।
Okay, now when I refer to customizing the Photoshop interface, what I mean is arranging the panels and some of the other interface elements that we have in a way that works for you. So in other words, if you run into 5 different Photoshop users, you're going to see 5 different interfaces for Photoshop. Everybody always customizes things to their own liking. Think of this as rearranging the furniture inside Photoshop. Okay. Now I'm going to get you started off with a look at some of the pre-existing Photoshop workspaces. What a workspace is a saved Photoshop interface. It's pretty simple. Way up towards the top right corner where it reads Essentials, if you drop down that menu, what we're going to see is a set of existing or pre-created Photoshop workspaces or interfaces. So for instance, I could go painting. Maybe I'm going to use Photoshop for a lot of digital painting. Well, I'm going to go painting, and what happens here is some of the panels and other interface elements rearrange themselves. I am now inside the painting workspace, if that makes sense. I could drop this guy down. Maybe I'm going to use Photoshop for a lot of photography instead. I'll choose this guy. Again, we get a different arrangement of the panels inside the interface. And so on with typography or with motion. Lots of different interfaces, lots of different options that we have here. Okay? Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go all the way back to Essentials though. And what that does is that takes you and I all the way back to where we started. So what I'm going to do here for you is I'm going to simultaneously show you how to customize the Photoshop interface and also how to save your own custom workspace that you can go and retrieve at any point in time. Okay? So you can certainly follow me along here if you want. Again, though, everybody typically will find their own workspace that works for them. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do some opening and closing of some different Photoshop panels. I'm going to keep my layers panel open. I'm going to start with him. But channels, I'm going to get rid of. How am I going to get rid of them? Well, check this out. I'm going to take the channels panel tab itself where it reads channels, and I'm going to click and tear that guy away. Click and drag on that guy and pull him right out into the middle of the screen. And then I'm going to click on the X in the top corner. Now, this doesn't mean that I've deleted the channels palette or anything like that. He's still available, don't forget, from our laundry list of Photoshop panels. I can always go and retrieve him whenever I want. He's simply not available on screen at any given time. I have to go to the window menu to activate him. That's all that means. Okay? All right, so I've got layers, I've got paths. That's fine with me. I use paths quite a bit. I'm going to head up towards this guy, though, my history panel, which I use a lot of. Now, if you don't see this icon on screen, just head to your window menu and look for history. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tear this guy away, and then what I'll do is I'll drag and drop him into the paths group. Now, you have to be a little careful here. When you're dragging around here, look for the blue rectangle. As you're moving your mouse around, it's that blue rectangle that I'm after. When I see the blue rectangle, I'm going to let go with my mouse. What that does is that groups the history panel together with paths and layers. Okay, as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take history and I'm going to drag them towards the left to rearrange the panel groups. So now it goes layers, history, paths. Okay, this is what customizing the interface is all about. Okay, all right. Now, the Actions panel, for myself anyway, is still kind of kicking around here. I don't want this guy on screen all the time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear him away, and then I'll close him out just like I did with channels. And you know, as a matter of fact, I'm going to do that with a few other guys here. Properties, you know what? As a matter of fact, I'm going to keep properties kicking around because I do use this guy. I'm going to drag and drop him into the layers, history, and paths group, something like this. But my brushes and also the brush presets, I don't need. So what I'm going to do here for these guys is I could tear them, each of them away and then close them out individually, or I could go to their panel menu. Now this is something that I didn't show you earlier, which I should have. Every panel has a menu in the top right corner. And when I click on this guy, we're going to get a variety of options. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to choose Close Tab Group, and that'll get rid of those two guys for me. Okay, so just to rewind for a second, because I did mean to show you this earlier and it slipped my mind. Every panel has a panel menu, okay? Or at least most of the panels have a panel menu that give you lots of different options related, of course, to that panel, Okay, so apologies for not showing you that earlier. Okay, so here's my setup so far. I've got color, I've got swatches, adjustments, I'm going to keep them kicking around, styles, I'm not going to use styles, at least not for now, so I'll close him out. Adjustments, I'm going to drop him into color and swatches, something like this. What I try to do myself is I really try to work in kind of a minimalist, sort of economical approach. That's my approach anyway for Photoshop and some of my other Adobe programs. So I'm going to reduce down the number of panels that I'm working on. The other thing that I'll do sometimes is I'll collapse these guys down just to icons. Sometimes icons and the names, but I'm going to go all the way down to just icons. This gives me a huge amount of elbow room here inside the actual Photoshop work area. Okay? All right. Now, some other panels that you may want to have kicking around. I'm going to head to the window menu one more time. And let's see, I'm going to start off with paragraph. I'm going to grab paragraph. That opens up my paragraph panel, this guy here. And I'm also going to grab character. He opens up as well. So paragraph and character. If you're doing a lot of text formatting and things like this inside Photoshop, you may want to have these guys kicking around. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to group these guys together. Again, that blue rectangle that we see when we drag a panel into another panel, we'll group them together for us. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these guys by dragging on the dark gray bar across the top, and I'm going to dock them to the interface. Right now, they're just kind of floating around in the interface. I can move them around wherever I want. I'm going to dock them, though, way over on the left-hand side of my screen. Note the blue vertical line running right up the edge of the toolbox, indicating that if I let go with my mouse, these guys are now docked over onto the left-hand side of the interface. So, if I wanted to, I could go and open up more panels and dock some of these other panels over onto the left-hand side of my interface. That is perfectly fine, whatever you want to do here. And as a matter of fact, for good measure, I'm going to collapse these guys down to icons as well, something like this. Okay? So obviously, the more that you work with Photoshop, the more comfortable you're going to get, the more you're going to get an idea of what all these different panels and tools and so on do. And obviously, the better sense you're going to have of which panels and which tools you're going to use most often and which ones you want to keep kicking around on screen. Okay? So what I want to do now is I want to save this custom workspace that you and I have gone and created. So I'm going to head back to this workspace drop-down menu in the top right corner, and I'm going to choose New Workspace, just like so. Now, give your new workspace some kind of a name. I'm going to name this after myself, Jeff's Snazzy Workspace. How's that? Something like that. Something that'll work for you. Or, maybe a little bit more realistically, a little bit more real world. Some workspaces maybe I'll want to set up for different purposes. For example, web design workspace, photo touch-up workspace, things like this. Workspaces that will give me access to the tools and panels that I'm going to use for specific tasks. Okay, so consider that. In any regard, I kind of like the name of this workspace, so I'm going to stick with it, save it up. There it is, Jeff's Snazzy Workspace. So now I can switch it to some of the other workspaces that we were exploring earlier on, and then, of course, at any point in time, I can go back to Jeff's Snazzy Workspace, and sure enough, there's my saved, customized Photoshop interface.